Hello all. Oops, sorry. Hello all. Welcome to tonight's stream. In tonight's stream, we're going to be discussing some ideas of power similar to what we've discussed in the past, and how the Twitter takeover might be used as a representation of power.
Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And as Dave mentioned at the beginning there, we are going to be having a little discussion about power tonight. And there's a few things that we'll probably have to cover first, just to cover off the basics of power. But most of you will know what we're going to say on this topic anyway, so we'll probably reference back to earlier episodes for anyone who wants a more detailed description. Of course, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask as we go along. We'll catch up with you as we can. Now, Dave, this particular topic is obviously quite a hot topic at the moment, isn't it?
It is. I mean, everybody's talking about Elon Musk buying Twitter. The website's full of his sycophants all praising him and talking about how he needs to take on Apple and all that kind of stuff at the moment.
Yeah, the Apple one's a bit of an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I've actually seen people saying, "Oh, Apple are a good company, showing us what the right thing to do is," and it's just like, they're sort of fighting people in China over the whole forced labor thing.
Didn't the riots happen only like 4 days ago or something?
And they're built on slave labor. So I mean, Apple is not necessarily a paragon of virtue by any means. I mean,
no,
I've got plenty of reasons to dislike them. But before we get on to a rant about Apple, let's try and stay on topic a little bit.
See, this is why we have Luke here, so we can rant about Apple and make him feel guilty because he owns the product.
Most definitely. So, hello to everybody who's actually joined us in the chat as well. And Srida, hope you enjoy your time cooking. Need to connect, how you doing? Yes, it's the Power Hour. Pierre, how you doing, buddy? And Kimmo, nice to have you here all at the start. And anyone else out there who's watching, feel free to pop by the chat. And hello to everybody on the rerun. So, Dave, when we're discussing power, I think we need to ask the question, what is power? I think quite often people have quite a basic understanding of power. And I think mine, before we started doing these streams, was as basic as everyone else's. So can we just go through a few different, definitions of power and how we're using power tonight?
Well, we'll talk about it in context with all of them, really, I think, because it makes sense, because I don't think there is any one concept of power. Like, all the various different concepts of power kind of describe all the different types of power that kind of happen. The first and most basic one, which could be considered the one-dimensional version of power, I guess.
The one that everyone knows?
Yeah. And that is the ability to make somebody do something they otherwise wouldn't have done.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the pretty simple one. And I mean, if you think about that, you can see some pretty good examples just straight away from Elon Musk buying Twitter. How many people have fled Twitter?
Yeah. How many people have come back to Twitter as well?
Yeah. So that's the very basic one. And then there's a sort of three-dimensional power from Stephen Lukes. And I suppose the simplest way to put that one is it's the ability to make someone do something they otherwise wouldn't have done. That's one dimension. The ability to control the conversation, and that's another dimension.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, we've spoken about that in terms of media, and even like the YouTube algorithm and what it puts in
Yeah,
front of you. Um, Moderation, for example, is technically a form of power. These are the things you're not allowed to say. If you say
yeah,
these things, you're silenced.
yeah, exactly. And another dimension of power is the ability to create the subject, so to speak. So if we think back to the discussion we were having the other night about the gamification of atheism,
Mm-hmm.
you think about how social media works. It creates people who are chasing likes. It creates a particular kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And those in charge can create the kind of conversation using all the different dimensions of power. They can create that conversation and create the kind of Twitter user that they most want, that is good for advertising or good for click throughs and all that kind of stuff.
Which is, I
So,
think, one of the reasons why Twitter has never become long form in its responses, because it wants that quick, snappy person who
yeah,
goes through message, ad, yeah, and they can build this quick and easy profile from someone. And as you say, the like, the retweet, and all of that sort of
yeah.
thing. And they could change the way Twitter operates and encourage a better conversation. It would be difficult to do. In social media, I think it would be very difficult to actually encourage a good conversation, but it's not impossible.
Oh, no, it's definitely not impossible. But because those who have the power to control the algorithm have the power to control the way the conversation is done, only if that benefits them will they ever change that sort of thing. So they have the power over the users in that sense. And they can make them do stuff they otherwise would not have done, because normally most people would have that more sort of long form conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They would have the more detailed conversation.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And I think for a certain amount of time, when I first got onto Twitter, it was learning to try and make my comments more concise. And I think that's a good skill to have. I think if you can learn to reduce something to a point where I've made the same thing that would take me 100 words in 10 words, and it's got the exact same content, there's nothing different there, great, you've done a good job. But for the most part, most conversations are more complex than fitting them into, I think it was, what was it, 180 characters originally, and it's now, or
Wasn't it
160?
128?
Or something like that. Basically,
Yeah.
whatever the old SMS was, that was the
Yeah.
original design, the same as an original SMS. And now it's 280 characters, and it's still not enough for anyone that wants to actually have a proper conversation.
Yeah. Because it was originally meant for celebrities to tweet out catchy things that allowed them to talk to their audience and advertise their products and advertise their films without it actually looking like an advert.
Mm-hmm.
And it was designed for sloganeering, that kind of thing. But as more users have built up, it's taken on a different kind of life. And there is a couple more forms of power. Um, if we, this is Hannah Arendt's idea of power, and power is the ability to organize. Um, and through that organization, change the way things are within society. So, sorry, I was just reading Kimo's tweet. Tweet,
I know what
comment.
you meant.
Yeah. um, so, power is the ability to motivate and be mobile and change society. So, let's think of young Earth creationists in America. If there's enough of them formed, and they get people in the right places, they can get rid of evolution in schools. They can start teaching young Earth creationism in schools. And the only way to oppose it would be for atheists to organize and mobilize and put together their own power and get people in the right places.
Mhm.
And so that's another form of power, the ability to change your environment, change your society, bring in the rules that you want. Um, and in the case of Elon Musk, what we've seen here is that it isn't just the ability to mobilize people,
Yeah.
but mobilize money. Because
Yeah.
he's got $40 billion that enabled him to buy one of the largest social media companies, which then enabled him to alter the conversations that are going on. Because if you think it was yesterday or the day before, he announced that they'll no longer be posting COVID misinformation stuff.
Well, I mean, I'd see that as a
Or not
positive.
not labeling COVID
Oh,
misinformation
really? Oh, that's
as
not a
COVID
positive.
misinformation. No, no. But he says it's in the name of free speech.
No, it's not.
And it's not, is it? No. But he's because he's got that power, he can do it. And because there's all these people chomping at the bit that want to be able to do it, they get behind him and give him more power to be able to actually alter the things. And that pushes more people away from Twitter, those that would normally stand up, because you think, well, I don't have the power to do anything here. So I'm going somewhere else where I don't have to put up with this. And then we see, as I stated before, about power being the ability to control the conversation and control what's allowed to be said. There you go. There's an example of power from the Twitter takeover in something that seems sort of innocent, but not. Ooh, you okay?
Yeah, sorry, my microphone just stopped showing that it was working, so I switched to a different thing, and I just wanted to test it was on. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Ah,
interrupt you there. I was just looking for the. I was trying to do
no,
it
no,
in
it's
a
all
way that
good.
didn't disturb you.
And Kimo's just made a really good point here. Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism knocked him down to the canvas. And it did the same for me, and so did On Violence. Um,
Martin
and
talks
that's the
about that one quite a bit as well, doesn't he?
yeah. And the essay, The Banality of Evil, that she wrote because she went over to watch the trials of the SS camp guards and, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she said the one thing that really struck her about all these really evil people that committed this giant genocide is that they were so banal and so boring. And if you think about Elon Musk, that's one of his problems. That's why he is he's like the edgelord, isn't he? He's a tryhard because I would say in real life he's probably a very banal person. So he goes out of his way to put on this persona. And he's doing all these things like bringing Trump back, bringing Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad. He's brought James Lindsay back. And all these people are kind of evil.
Jorden
Um,
Peterson.
Jorden Peterson. And when you think about it, they're actually all pretty banal people.
Mm. That's true. I mean, look at Jorden Peterson. He has to use words, such colourful language that doesn't actually make that much sense from the things he's strung them together just to make himself sound
Yep.
intelligent and interesting.
Yep. So there's another example of power. And finally, the last one, it sort of goes back to something I said before. And this comes from Foucault. And Foucault, his idea of power, the ultimate kind of power,
Mm.
is the ability to shape society in such a way that you create the subjects without them knowing that they've been created this way. So you have so much control over them, you create them. And to some degree, now that Twitter's been taken over, if all the people that are against COVID misinformation are pushed away, And regular people come onto Twitter and see all this COVID misinformation without anybody fighting back against it. They are creating subjects to distrust the government, to distrust medical advice. And those, remember we were talking about echo chambers, not
Yep.
just filter bubbles, but echo chambers. He is creating a giant echo chamber out of Twitter and pulling people in without them actually realizing they're being pulled into this echo chamber. So he is exerting a form of power through that method.
And all under the guise of this free speech thing,
Free speech. Yeah.
Which, when I see people talking about free speech, it really sort of sings that they're not talking about free speech, or not understanding what free speech is or what free speech is meant to be. And I wonder why it has been. I mean, we from all of our conversations, we can easily put our finger on why, but these sort of things get memed and used as this whole sort of this will get my way, this will get my way, this little tagline: free speech, free speech, free speech, make America great again, you know, and all of that sort of stuff. Actually, like, what are you referring to when you say that? What do you actually mean? Because I don't think you mean what most people actually think you mean.
The average person thinks that free speech is just the right to say whatever you want. The right to express your views and to counter mainstream narratives without any repercussions. Which isn't really, I mean, I suppose if you're going for a sort of unlimited free speech, that's what you have. You're allowed to say anything you like, but most people wouldn't think free from repercussions. But a lot of this is them wanting to argue and say what they like without repercussions. That's why they're kind of glad that Elon Musk has bought out Twitter, because like you see Elon Musk talking about the culture war and saying, I'm out to stop the left. I'm out to stop conservatives being censored and conservatives losing their voice. By doing that, he kind of creates a clique that is drawn to him, and helps back him up. And we get back to the idea of power being a collection of people that has the ability to push things forward and change the way things are. And if Elon Musk is involved in the culture war, and because he's banal and because he actually wants to be worshipped as this great person, he does all this and gets fed, his ego gets fed, and therefore he pushes more for this so that he can gain more power. It's a very interesting cycle.
Very much so.
Your mic's died. I can't hear you.
There you go.
There you go.
That was really weird. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on tonight. It keeps on like cutting off for a bit and then it comes back. I think actually I mentioned this to you earlier in the week. My sound card appears to be dying, and it's the second one that I've had that seems to be dying. And unfortunately, I think that I'm now out of warranty with this one. So it's a case of, do I just spend the money on a USB mic that doesn't require a sound card and get rid of the SM58s, or buy another one of these or some other sort of thing. But anyway, just saying, I'm going to cover off some of the chat quickly, just so you all know that we're not leaving you hanging. And Frida says, power has the capacity to do work. The amount of energy transferred or converted per unit time. I mean, yes, that is a scientific, or especially on the physics side of power. You're definitely right there, but contextually wrong, perhaps, because we're talking about it more in a sort of political philosophy sense. So, need to connect. All words have many meanings, though, as well as definitions. So, everyone's really walking around with different ideas of the same word. Yes, this is very, very, very common. I think you'll be aware that the word atheism is one of these words that has a lot of people arguing constantly because they're all saying other people don't know what atheism means. And actually, it means all those things that people are saying. And what they've got to do is find what they want it to mean for the conversation, because that's what it can mean. So I will definitely agree with you there. Lone Wolf, I can't say what you said next because I cannot give that person any airtime. Need to Connect says, who's to judge good and bad? Certainly not human such as I, hiding behind a veil that I created with my own perception. Well, it depends on what you mean by good and bad as well. Who is to judge? I think that we all judge on a regular basis of what good and bad is, and I think the way to do it is as rationalized as possible. You also go on to say to you that Elon is no different than YouTube or any other form of censorship organization. No, I mean that's the thing. They generally aren't. We've actually addressed YouTube and their algorithm in a previous stream. So I'm definitely with you there. It's just that this is a more recent one, and it's relative to a topic in philosophy that is actually quite interesting. So it's nice to have like a fresh example to relate these different ideas of power to. Lone Wolf says, if the average person thinks the right of free speech is the libertarian right to say anything you wish to say, then they don't know much about the reality of freedom or speech. Yes. Free speech, like any other action, bears consequences. Some can live with the fallout, some cannot. Yes. See, I think that's part of the thing that many people don't actually see when it comes to free speech. You can be free to say whatever you like, but you're not necessarily free from the consequences. We live in a universe. I don't know what's going on with my mic today, but we live in a universe of cause and effect. I'm just going to quickly check and see if my noise gate has changed settings without me knowing. Oh, no, but I'll turn it. I'll change it a bit. Change it there. So what was I saying, Dave? The consequences. Yeah, we live in a universe governed by the laws of cause and effect. So why should anything we say not be bound by that as well? Why should we be allowed to say anything that we want without any repercussion? Yes, you can say what you want, but certain things are going to cause people to take actions. And that's the first problem. What you can say can be motivating to other people. What you can say can cause people to riot the Capitol. What you can say can cause people to stop taking vaccinations and end up, having a pandemic where people are refusing to follow medical advice. There should be repercussions for this sort of thing. Yes, you can say it, right? That's fine. But I think there needs to be a certain level of fact check. I'm not up for censorship. See, censorship would be not letting people say anything. But no, let people say it and then say, but this is why you're wrong. And the fact that Elon is doing a lot to take away this bit where, the fact checking is happening, how he's allowing misinformation go out because it benefits his pocket. That's the end of it. It benefits his pocket for and his ego for this stuff to happen. I don't think that's right, personally, because they're not doing it in for free speech. He's doing it for himself, right? He's not doing it for free speech. He's using a misguided version of free speech to get his end away, essentially.
And I think here's an interesting distinction between the YouTube algorithm as an expression of power and Elon Musk buying Twitter. The YouTube algorithms as an expression of power it does direct the way certain videos are made, and directs the algorithm directs what people see. But that's mostly in a sense to bring in advertising revenue and to make YouTube money. And to some degree, that is kind of what Elon Musk is doing as well. But Elon Musk has a very specific ideology in mind as well. So he is gaming the system in such a way that his ideology is promoted and put forward. And his fanboys, he gathers them around and they help him with that as well. He brings back all the people that kind of support what he wants to. So there is a slight difference between the power going on with the YouTube thing and what Elon Musk is doing, because it's ideologically driven rather than capitalistic driven.
Would you say that there's more intent as well?
Oh yeah, most definitely, because he knows that he can get certain advertisers, and he can get certain hardcore followers, but he has to play to them. So there is an intent to play to those people, because Elon Musk fanboys would be willing to jump in front of a bullet to save him because they think he is going to be this guy who's going to save the future. And he can play to that. So he has the intent to do that. Whereas the same thing doesn't happen in something like YouTube. That's all very automated.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of where I was getting with the intent sort of thing. It is automated for the most part, and yeah, it's built on things. And I mean, it sort of ties into how sort of systemic racism almost comes into play. How there are, all these studies and things like that. Like we were talking about the AI sentencing bot, the AI court, and giving worse sentences and things to black people than it was white people, just because it looked at the history and it was like, well, in all of these cases before this happened, so this, and that can sort of happen with an automatic system, and that sort of, it can be why you might be pushed more and more things that you find weird. I mean, at the moment, I don't know why I'm getting pushed some of the stuff I'm getting pushed on YouTube, but it's not in the sense that I'm being pushed a load of right-wing stuff anymore. It's just loads of random stuff that isn't stuff that I actually search for ever, so I don't know why it's coming up. But that's neither here nor there. Quite often it will push things to you that will make you interact and show you the advertising and things like that. I maybe they've just had a small change in their algorithm. Just catching up with the chat again. So need to connect. Don't mind me. I seem to be opinionated by being so vague. Don't mean to offend. There is no offense taken. I've been enjoying your comments. I enjoy anyone interacting with us, and you're definitely in the right place if you want a conversation and be in a safe space, or at least as safe as you can be being on YouTube. So, Wolf thinks it's a short in the XLR. It could be, and if that's the case, I do have a couple of XLR cables I can switch it out with. So thank you for that. I will try that tomorrow. unless the mic completely dies on stream, obviously. And at that point, we'll have to get Dave to do his happy dance. No one has seen it in 2 years. And Frida says, no, it does not. Free speech is the ability to speak out against the government without consequences. It's not meant to be used to lie and defame and spread misinformation. And I think that we'd be in agreement with that. I think definitely against the government. But I do think that you do deserve the right to say what you want to other people without consequences. But I also think that, if you want to speak out against the government, again, if you're lying, you're actually lying. Surely there should be some sort of consequence as well. I think that's the thing. If you had a government that was pushing this misinformation and you're standing out against it, fine. But actually, if you have a government doing the right thing, consider the pandemic. They were telling you the right thing to do, and wear your mask, get your vaccination, and so on. And you're standing up against them and you're protesting them. I think that there should be consequences, because it doesn't just affect you standing up against the government. There's other people who are influenced by it. So Need to Connect was making a comment about YouTube. It goes really deep down too, where it even affects the mentality of smaller channels. Yes, it does. I mean, you actually look at so many channels and behaviors online in general. But if we're talking specifically about YouTube, there are so many that try and start the drama and beef with other channels because drama sells, arguments sell.
One of the most popular kind of post on social media is posts that encourage moral outrage.
Oh, most definitely.
And drama is another one, because that in a sense is kind of linked to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we see so much moral outrage on Twitter. Because it also enables, going back to the discussion we were having the other day, it enables moral outrage porn. So it enables people to feel like they're being very moral without having to put the effort in of actually being moral.
Yeah, most definitely. And just to skip ahead briefly, Lone Wolf says, I'm moral outrage personified. I think you are, yes. Actually, coming back to another one of your comments, Wolf, though, you say something similar to us, where you say the ability to speak against the government could include lying to defame and spread misinformation to affect elections with the government. So I think that's kind of protected too, odd as it seems. And there you go. That's another example of why it should be protected in certain circumstances. So very, very much. Kimo says, speaking of fanboying, big kudos on busting the 1K subscriber thing. Sorry, I'm late on that. No, thank you very much. We're amazed that it ever happened. We were saying we never thought that we'd get over 100.
I didn't.
So it's amazing that we got to the 1,000. So yeah, we're quite happy. We're planning. It was my fault this week, but we were planning on doing a free-for-all. But maybe next Thursday we'll get everybody on the Discord.
I won't be here, remember.
Oh, yeah. Okay, not next Thursday, because Dave's not here.
I'm away next week.
Yeah. So maybe just do a mix and chat next Thursday. But yeah, we will have sort of a Christmas free-for-all AMA and 1,000 subscriber party type thing where anyone can come on and join us on the Discord. We actually haven't used Discord in I don't think we've even used it this year, have we? But yeah, we'll sort of wind that back up again and get everybody on, because it's you can get more people on your Discord chat for free than you can anywhere else. So that's probably the place we'll go. But yes, thank you, Kimo. Lone Wolf says slander and libel are lines in the sand. Were there any other big lines in the sand with speech you'd see, Dave?
Sorry. I was just loading up Discord and it started to update, and yeah, I'm gonna get Crisis Discord invite.
Okay, cool.
Um, I think it's kind of difficult. I think misinformation should be a line drawn there, especially when you think of misinformation like Trump put out.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's in the government. Um, and again, that's another example of power where he had the ability to put forward something with authority that shouldn't really have been put forward. I think misinformation is a line that's drawn in the sand because I suppose in some ways it is libel and slander because you're saying that somebody else is putting forward misinformation. But I think misinformation is a big one. In a
Yeah.
functioning society, like look at the damage that Alex Jones caused. Um, Look at the damage that QAnon causes. It's hard to stamp these people out, but those are kind of lines that should be drawn in the sand as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Um, Lone Wolf brings up something that I was actually going to say about politicians in general. But he says, as a matter of fact, the US system of elections is nearly dependent on the freedom to lie, defame, and spread misinformation. That's just how it works. And that's one of my big problems with politics in general, is the fact that you consider, right, if I was to get a job and I was to lie on my CV and they found out I lied on my CV, I'd be fired. Yet politicians largely get into power by lying. And when that's found out, people go, oh, and that's it. Like, anyway. But yes. Excellent. You were 1010. That's good. 101. There you go. You're here for Philosophy 101. And thank you for the sub. Oh, carrying on through. Heyo, and yeah, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences. It says a lot about how people navigate these things. Nice to see you, Crisis. Good to see you. Been a while. But yes, you're right. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't understand why people think it does. You know, I want to be free to say anything I want. I want to be free to call you the worst thing ever, and you can't say anything or do anything back. And that's the thing. They want the free speech, but they don't want you to have the free speech back as well. It's like having a conversation. If I was to insult, I don't know, Dave, and it would be like, and then he was to say, insult me back. No, you can't say that to me. I've got free speech. What? What? So, carrying on. And Srida says, I never use Twitter. I hope you will both leave that cauldron and seething toxicity behind. I mean, it serves a purpose at the end of the day. I am on most social media platforms less and less, and I focus mostly on YouTube and TikTok. The main thing I come on Twitter for is to promote the YouTube and the TikTok and answer anything that we've got from it. So that's sort of what, I get tagged into something and I might have a conversation, but I honestly don't have the time to get into these conversations with people that are only looking to defend a position rather than have a conversation. I can have an amazing conversation with someone I disagree with completely, and it's because it's a positive conversation. That we don't agree, but the conversation is good. But generally, what you find on social media in general, not just Twitter, on social media in general, you don't have that. You have people looking to defend a position. And this is how these models are built. And this is sort of the power that we're sort of talking about. These models encourage these likes and shares and retweets and everything. And especially with something as fast form as Twitter, you get the quick likes, the quick messages, the quick reposts, and you get someone posts 10 messages that are actually all okay or in accordance with someone else, they'll get all of them liked in a row, and it's one after the other, and it's hit, 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 hit. There is no benefit for someone like Musk to actually improve Twitter in an objectively improved way, in a way that will actually better mankind or social interaction in any way. He can make improvements that will improve his revenue. He can make improvements that will help his friends out. They're the ones that he's going to make. I'd be very impressed if he actually turned Twitter into a place where good conversation could be held. So Crisis, yes, we do have a Discord. We haven't actually logged into it for about a year, because it was one of those things where everybody we knew was pretty much on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, and it was like, why are we going to be in Discord? We also found that a couple of people were having problems with their cameras using Discord back in the day. So we started using Google Meet, and we tried a couple of other things that worked. But actually, Dave's had his connection upgraded, and it's usually him and me. So it might be worth us revisiting it anyway, just to see how it goes. But yeah, we're definitely join us. Hey, how you doing, Doc? Nice to see you. Hope you're well. Trump is God. Anything he does is necessarily good because he did it. Oh dear. I don't want to get into a conversation about that tonight. Yeah, libel and slander are describing harmful misinformation with intent. Yeah, I mean, it could be used that way. I see what you're saying there, Wolf. QAnon's the real one. How dare you? It came out last week that Elon Musk has literally been lying about his education credentials for decades, and it made the news cycle for about 12 hours. I mean, he's done pretty well for himself. So it's not like he's saying, if you elect me, I will do X, Y, Z, and then actually doing the opposite. I think that's a bit different to that. But yeah, I don't like the fact that he's lying about his educational credentials or anything. I don't like lying in general, which actually ties into a stream that we're going to be doing next Tuesday. You feel less competent than your CV makes you look. Like, if I remembered all the stuff I learned, that would be fine, but I don't know. I'm totally with you. I mean, as a programmer, I mean, you're far further up the IT game than me, dude. But as a programmer myself, if it wasn't for Google and me just remembering keywords for certain bits of code, I wouldn't be able to code anymore, especially when you go back to a language that is like, oh yeah, you know how to do this in VBA, don't you? And I'm like, yes, I have done that lots of times, but the last time was 3 years ago. But it's called this. Hang on. I know where to look. I honestly, old school programmers, no wonder they were actually paid a hell of a lot more than programmers get paid today, because they had to learn it all. And no wonder things took a lot longer. Kimo says, a major problem in sustaining charges of libel or slander is that malicious intent needs to be demonstrated. It isn't always an easy thing to do. I'd agree that malicious intent is one of those things. So if you think about the anti-vaxxer, the average anti-vaxxer, they don't have a malicious intent. I would say that they have a misinformed intent. They are actually doing what they think is right, but the consequences of what they will say and do are going to cause a lot of harm. And I still think that something needs to be done. Like, they can say it, but it needs to be addressed each time. But I do think the anti-vaxxer is one of those people that is spreading this misinformation, but not with malicious or ill intent. So, don't lie. All you use Twitter for is RPA experiments. You're just trying to figure out how to more effectively exploit social media with bots. Typically my Twitter one has stopped working recently. So, I mean, I do use that now. Like one of the reasons I'm doing the RPA thing, just because I enjoy playing around with it, but is so that I can minimize my time on social media even more while still doing a few things that I need to do, like sharing out our articles and stuff like that, but having it done in a way that I can control instead of having to pay for services or use a service that's not doing it quite right. But yeah. Social media is one of the hardest things to automate, though, because they are constantly building things to stop bots working. So this is another form of power that they have, which, for the most part, I think people would agree that bots are a good thing for them to stop. And most bots work differently in the ways of like RPA does. Like RPA is very front end automation, so it is emulating user responses, but what they do is they change like the IDs and the background code. Facebook is the hardest one to crack, actually. Every time I get it working, it just resets itself. So that one is really, really frustrating. But yeah, so there you go. Social media has the power over certain things, like what you can program. I mean, they offer you these things like developer tools and API keys and all of that. And as long as you do it their way through their platform, it's okay, but you can only do certain things. And if you try and do anything out of the box, well, and Dave, doesn't that tie into, they're controlling what you can and can't do?
I mean, yeah, to some extent. But I suppose that's more a security thing than a power thing. But
But
it could be considered a form of power.
isn't having effective security a way to say that you have a certain level of power in itself?
Yeah, I guess so. But it's not forcing you to behave in a way you wouldn't otherwise do, or it's not controlling the conversation you can have, it's just controlling the amount of interaction you can have from the outside. I mean, security is pretty important, so
Oh, most definitely. So Martin, how you doing? He says that what Musk is doing would actually be the same as, if you elect me, I'll do A to Z and then doing something else. He just wants popularity instead of office. No, you're very right. And that's sort of what we're talking about tonight as well, which we're going to get onto, is actually the damage he can do. So it's obvious the damage that a politician can do, and do quite regularly, and they lie and get to keep their power. And Musk has bought a platform, and there are certain things that he's doing, and we've talked about a few things where he's controlling the conversation and things like that, but there's also obvious harms that he could be doing. So, Dave, is it the point in the conversation where we should probably move on to the various forms of harm?
yeah. I mean, uh, just to bring back something that was said earlier about free speech for me, but not for thee, we can sort of see that ability in Twitter. He is very much for promoting this idea of free speech. I know it's not free speech as such, but it's these are the people I want to be allowed to speak. Those who he doesn't want to be able to speak, like, say, transgender activists, because as far as I know, Elon Musk is very anti-transgender. He can now bring forward those voices, like the James Lindsay voices, promote the idea that all transgenders are groomers. Well, those who kind of argue against James Lindsay can be shadow banned. They can be made so that their posts have to be searched out rather than get promoted by the algorithm. They can be hidden behind the little more replies button. Or he can just ban them. So the idea of free speech for me and not for thee is very much controlled now by Elon Musk. And if you think about Twitter, I think it's the second or third largest social media.
I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah. So he now has the power. I mean, how many users are there on Twitter?
I mean, at least half of them are bots, so I don't know.
Yeah. And that's another way he can sort of game the system. Remember the poll? Should we bring Trump back? All he has to do is then send 1 million bots out to vote. And it looks like he's Vox Populi. The people have voted. But they haven't. He's voted. Just made it look like he's doing the people's will rather than making the people do his will.
The funniest thing about that as well, he was bragging about how 134 million people had seen the poll. And I even said in response to him, yeah, but only 15 million voted. And it was actually really close. So what does that tell you? Most people don't care either way, if they're real people. And the people that do care enough to vote are pretty much on par with each other. And if you're voting Trump back in based on a popular vote, that's quite ironic. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so that's one of the harms that he can do.
Yeah, so basically limiting the accounts, limiting conversation, guiding things his way, shadow banning people, basically making it so a conversation about topics that he cares about are controlled about. So, as we said, free speech for me, not for thee.
Yeah. And I know it was kind of that way in the past as well, because you couldn't go on Twitter and sprout out a bunch of racist slurs or stuff like that. What did Elon Musk call it? It was driven by the woke agenda. And so there is sort of that thing going on in most algorithms, but it wasn't done out of ideology. It was done out of advertising revenue. Similar to, as we were discussing with YouTube, it's not driven by the desire to promote these alt-right conspiracy theories or that kind of thing, whereas for Musk, it is driven by that desire.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the more dangerous things that we can see from Musk is that he is a bit of an ideologue, and he now has control of one of the biggest social media things and can control what is allowed to be talked about, control what people see. And if you think about how much people are influenced by stuff that just kind of goes on in their periphery, and and how much they get caught up in these moral outrage things and these moral panics. Elon Musk now has the power to control the moral outrage and control the moral panics.
One of the weird thing is, like, if you look up information on Elon Musk and his political ideology, he sort of yo-yos around. I was reading something the other day, and I've just done a quick Google now, and he supported Bush in 2004, but then Obama in 2012, Clinton, as in Hillary Clinton in 2016, and Joe Biden in 2022. So it looks like there was sort of a big liberal shift there. And this year, he has said he's going to start voting for Republican Party candidates. And, you know, he does support things like universal basic income, which is great. I think that's something most Republicans and or any conservative anywhere around the world generally doesn't. But he also has gun rights, freedom of speech. But as we've seen, that he doesn't really have a good understanding of what freedom of speech actually is. Tax on carbon emissions and things like that. So, and I was reading something the other day, and it was sort of saying that, you know, he's socially liberal but economically conservative for and that sort of thing. But his behavior recently doesn't seem to demonstrate that to me. So it's like he's saying one thing and doing another and then saying another, and it feels like something you said earlier. He's going for the popular vote wherever it is. He's going by, oh, what? You know what? The Liberals aren't stroking my ego when I say I'm going to do this thing. So do you know what? I'm going to go for the Republicans. Oh, they're stroking my ego. And that is, it's not even a political ideology he's going for. It's an ego-driven ideology based on whoever is going to give him the most likes.
And the most money.
I wonder if he even cares about the most money. I'm sure he wants Twitter to generate the money. I'm sure he does. But I think he might want the likes more.
Yeah, but as far as I know, he's got investors and loans that have to be paid off. So, yeah.
And I suppose that's another thing that could be a negative as well, because as we've seen from politics in general, but especially in America, they get, a lot of money from their various investors to support their campaigns, and that comes back and they have to do certain things that maybe they wouldn't do, or was against one of the things that they wanted to do in their campaigns. And that's another thing. Like, people actually have a certain level of power over Musk, and not necessarily the people you want to have power over Musk.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's where there's a nice dance of power, because Musk now has the ability to shape what is allowed to be talked about, shape what people see, shape the conversations, force people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. But then you have people further up the chain that are doing that to Musk behind the scenes. And Musk is just the guy that will catch all the flack for it. And the other people we don't know about.
No, and I suppose that's sort of scary. I mean, I know it sort of makes you sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearing type person, but it's still a worry. Who's the power behind the power?
Well, I mean, here's a good example of power behind the power. Musk reinstated Trump. And he was like, yeah, we'll bring Trump back. Everybody's happy. And then he sort of sucked up to Trump. Like, why won't you come back? But Trump is stuck in his own thing, the Truth Social, I think it's called, where he has to be there exclusively. So there's somebody that has power over Trump. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Without people even realizing it.
Brilliant. Silly, isn't it, though, really?
Oh yeah. But that's the way the world works, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
And
know it does. I just quickly
here's
loaded up Twitter, and and Musk is actually begging people that don't tweet to start tweeting. I mean, that's the way I frame it. He's just said, I meet so many people who read Twitter every day but almost never tweet. If I may beg your indulgence, please add your voice to the public dialogue. I mean, he's written it well, but he's basically just begging people to start tweeting.
it's a begging letter. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. Please just make it look like we're busier than we are. So anyway, you were saying, here's the thing.
I can't remember
now. So going back to the comments in the chat, Lone Wolf says Google truly has all the power. I think Google has a hell of a lot of power. I think that I'm not in accord with everything that they might do, but I think that if I had to choose between Google and Musk, I know where I'd go. It's a shame they were so late and behind with their social media thing, and then binned it when it was finally getting good. But yes. So I finally found out the at symbol is called an ampersand. To my endless shame, I once called it an ampersand. Oh, so it's an aspirand, not an ampersand. I was rightly called a symbol. I always thought it was an ampersand as well. So now I am definitely confused. Is it an ampersand or an aspirand? Let's have a quick look.
An ampersand is the and sign.
Oh yes. Yes.
I always used to just call that symbol the at symbol.
Yeah. No, okay. No. I think you're right. Yeah. No, I knew the and was the ampersand. I think I got confused there. But yes. I didn't know that the at symbol was called the aspirand at all. So I wasn't calling it anything wrong. I just never knew it had a specific name. So there you go. I've learned something tonight, and I'm done. Goodbye. And Frida says dictionaries should be prescriptive, not descriptive. Otherwise, uneducated buffoons with zero clue change the meaning of everything just by misusing and abusing a language they don't understand. See, I'm not in complete accord with you there. I think that there is a certain level of rigor that should go into a dictionary. But I think they should also be descriptive, but they can be contextual. And that's why you have like medical dictionaries versus, learners dictionaries, university dictionaries, philosophical dictionaries, technical dictionaries, and so on and so forth. And I think that there is a use to having these different sort of dictionaries. And I think that we should actually have these definitions where, as you say, so vaccine becomes poisonous mercury compound that causes autism. We should just have a buffoon's dictionary. And that's where that definition slots in. See? So it's not about preventing the freedom of speech. It's just drawing an attention to that this is actually wrong, but this is a definition certain people use. It really was a power hour. They talked about it for an hour. I'm so happy right now. I'm glad to make someone happy. So Martin says, what's perhaps the most insidious thing about Twitter is the hash and trending page. Opinion programs have taken to using these, despite the small sample size Twitter provides. Yeah, trending topics always confuse me. They tend to be things that I'm not interested in at all. So, but yeah, I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe I'm just really not on the pulse of the average human. I don't get the neurotypical view. um, as the great Joyce Carey said in his masterpiece, The Horse Mouth, through cash to culture. Yeah. um, Google owns the social media platform you use most, YouTube. Well, Alphabet Company, yes, and I know that they bought it, but they didn't have it originally, and they used to have their own one that was like another Facebook, and no one used it because it was just another Facebook. But I used to like a lot of the things that Google did. I used to like Hangouts as well because it used to have SMS integration and all of that. And then they took it away and they just made it crap. And they tried to launch a new program to combat WhatsApp. But yes, anyway, we're getting way off topic now. I could rant about technology and technology companies all night. Lone Wolf, you have a good point here about dictionaries are a record of how words are being used at particular times and do not stay the same. That's why we can use them to map the evolution of living languages. And that's great. And I think that people need to actually take some more time to actually understand the etymology of things and not take just a translation of what they think this word meant, because sometimes words can have a direct translation that don't actually resemble how those words were used. But I've got a video coming out about that in a few days. Dave, so we've addressed the fact that he can now basically control the conversation and the people, and actually there's people who have power over him, and we don't know what or who a lot of them might be and what they are requiring him to do. And we don't know how much of what he's doing is his intent or his investors' intent. What other things can you see coming from this? Because obviously we can see the problem with them allowing the vaccine misinformation, for example. This can, cause a hell of a lot of deaths, and mistrust in science, in medicine. People will stop going to, they've got a broken arm, but they're not going to go. So on and so forth. So, what other things could be a negative benefit from the power Elon has over Twitter now?
Well, as we discussed earlier, one of Hannah Arendt's ideas about power is the ability to collaborate, the ability to join forces and to gain strength from that, and use that to push forward certain values. And something that Twitter can now do is to push people away from the social media. I mean, you think of how many people are going over to places like Mastodon. So that spreads people thin and stops them being able to collaborate, stops them being able to work together, and stops them being able to fight the narrative that is being put forward by one of the biggest social media platforms there is. So not only is he controlling the ability to have the conversation, he's spreading it to places where people aren't actually going to be, so the information won't get out there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I think what you actually say about the inability to combat it. If you've actually left Twitter, and let's just say there's a couple of people who've been left lying around, shall we say, and they're trying to have the conversation, but they're dogpiled, because that's what happens on social media, especially on Twitter. They're dogpiled by all the people who are agreeing with what's his face, Musk. That's who we're talking about. But all the people who agree with you are over on a different platform. You don't have the power to actually combat the misinformation. And whereas when it's a little bit more even, there is the chance that you'll be able to maybe get a few people, not necessarily to change their mind, but to reconsider their position.
Yeah. So he's now kind of removed that option from people.
Mm.
And I mean, that was one of the good things about um, the COVID misinformation tag was that people didn't have to fight to combat this misinformation. It was already part of the algorithm. So by removing that and by spreading people thin and by controlling the conversation, it enables the COVID misinformation to flourish.
So, which in turn, obviously, can cause a lot more harm. So, not only is he allowing this information here, he's allowing it unmoderated and making it so that there aren't people who are going to be there coming on to correct it either because they're no longer around. And yeah, okay, so it's a double fold of harm. So it's not just like, oh yeah, you can say this shit again. It's you can say this shit again, and no one's going to do anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And because then the site becomes known for being a place that allows that, he gets more followers, he gets more people seeing the ads, so he's prompted to do it. Um, and so it just works out where he can exercise this power and, it makes things more harmful. And it suits him to actually do it. Even if he doesn't believe in that ideology, money is power. The more money he gets, the more power he has, the more power he then needs to assert over the actual Twitter, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think it could ever get to the point where someone like Musk turns it into uh, the Black Mirror social media episode? Do you remember that one? I think it was season 3, episode 1.
Yeah, I can't remember. Something crashed down or something like that.
I don't remember the title, but
Yeah, it had Ron Howard's daughter in it, where she was trying to get to the wedding.
mhm.
Yeah, I think so. I think social media is heading that way anyway. Do you ever watch The Orville?
The Orville was really good. Yeah, I've been waiting for the next season to come out.
There's an episode in The Orville where they visit a planet, um,
Yes, yeah,
and it's all done by social media.
yeah,
I think that's the way it's very much heading anyway.
yeah. I mean, how awful would that be? Everybody motivated by the like, just constantly. I mean, I don't know. It's awful, isn't it? Really. I'd much prefer to move to a more Star Trek-esque, or even like how the Orville, their equivalent of the Federation, I can't remember what it's called, is set out to be. Um,
You-
the Union, that's it. Yes. Uh, names have never been good in my head. um, yeah, there's a lot of different things, I guess, that you can see this ongoing negative effect that Musk could have. I mean, he could have a positive effect. I just don't think he will. But he has the power to be a positive effect if he so wishes. But between his money and desperation for the popularity and, his own want for the like, uh, we're sort of stuck with him making more of the worst of Twitter. Rather than making more of the best of Twitter, he's going to make more of the worst of Twitter because that's the stuff that brings the attention, brings the likes, brings the money to him in the way he wants it. I suppose another thing that he is doing is he's got the power to then start charging for check marks.
I mean, that's one of his plans anyway. And as we all know, most people kind of they have a reverence for authority. Um, I know there's the whole argument from authority fallacy that's thrown around these days, but
But
people
people still
do
have
kind
that reverence, though,
yeah.
don't they?
And so if they see this blue check mark, I mean, look at s- um, the insulin stock prices. Did you hear about
No,
them
no, no,
crashing?
no, I didn't.
Somebody paid to be verified on Twitter. As far as I know, it's true. I haven't looked into it that deep.
You do get a
Somebody,
check mark if you go for Twitter Blue. So
yeah, somebody paid for it and pretended to be a company that does insulin and made a tweet that said, "As of tomorrow, insulin will be free," and it crashed the market. So it shows that even just the veneer of respectability and the veneer of like authority, or people will buy. They'll take it into account. They won't question it, and it can cause kind of great damage.
Mm. That's insane. What do you out there think? Are there any sort of harms that you can see coming from the takeover? What do you think Musk is going to do? What are the things that you wish he would do, though? If there was anything that you could change about Twitter. And Frida says the best of Twitter, there was never anything slightly good about Twitter. I mean, I met a lot of great people on Twitter, to be fair, and had a lot of good conversations. So there's good there if you're willing to look for it. You've just got to wade through a hell of a lot of shit, and then you'll find a few people that are worth chatting to. And you know what? I find that is the same everywhere across social media. But you know what? That's the same as real life as well, really. It's just that people tend to be a little bit more shitty on social media than they are in real life. But again, that's kind of beneficial because sometimes you can be friends with someone in real life and find out they're that shitty later on in life. Whereas at least on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everything, the shitty people are that shitty from up front in general. So maybe that's beneficial. Um, this is interesting. You went to school with a guy that was colorblind. He couldn't see purple. All purple was blue to him. That's a very rare form of colorblindness. I mean, the most common being red, green, and then after that, I think it's red, yellow. So like red, green, it all looks green. Red, yellow, it all sort of like looks orange, I think. Um, and yeah, couldn't see purple. I mean, that's a shame. Purple's such an awesome color as well. Um, but yeah, did the glasses that sort of fix the colorblind work for that person? Um, and Frida says it said that it costs $10 to make a dose of insulin, and they sell it for $800. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, the whole medical thing in America makes me angry. I honestly don't. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry. You can see how I'm having trouble talking because it just makes me angry how they deal with it over there. Ansrita says, I can't understand social media. I have no idea where anyone would put real personal details on the internet or give a toss what anyone thinks of them or need to be trending. What the hell that means. Social media gives us an ability to be social without actually having to be sociable, I guess. I don't like being in big crowds and overly loud places unless the loudness is music. But like, when a busy pub can be quite frustrating. And things like that. I like interacting with people, but I like doing it at my own pace. I like the conversations I can have, and I like sharing certain things with my family, and I like discussing my interests with other like minded people. And actually, because of social media, um, I have some really, really good friends that I wouldn't have had because I wouldn't have met in real life. Pretty much every person who was a friend throughout my real life hasn't given a fuck about anything I'm interested in, or even me, really. They've all been friends of convenience that I thought were something more. And I think the friends that I've made on social media have been closer to real friends that I've ever had. And some of them I've actually met in real life. So that could be why someone uses social media. There are positives to it. Just depends on how you use it. Lone Wolf says, I think Musk is going to run Twitter into the ground, steal the source code, and repurpose the technology for some other purpose because that's what people like him do in situations like this. That's an interesting take. What do you think about that, Dave?
I think that'll probably happen. Elon Musk will run it into the ground, but it'll be taken over by people who are possibly worse than Musk.
Great. Martain also says, honestly, I can't see him do anything else other than run it into the ground. So, I mean, if he actually runs it into the ground, could we say that that's a positive?
Yes and no. Because you'll be losing one of the biggest social media things. And going back to my social psychology studies, do you remember the protests in Egypt, whenever it was 10 years ago?
No.
A lot of protests are arranged through social media.
Mm-hmm.
Not in places like China, obviously, but if you go back to the protests in Egypt, they all happened very quickly and they all got mobile very quickly through the use of places like Twitter. Um, so if Twitter is run into the ground and disappears, it takes away. Remember what I just said about how dispersing people all over takes away their ability to mobilize and takes away the average person's ability to form power. If Twitter is run into the ground, there's one avenue of power for the average person that's taken away.
Yeah, I suppose it's double-edged sword, really, for that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kimo says, to be candid, it's moot for me. I've never visited Twitter. I've got no particular beef with the platform. I've just not gotten around to it, I think. There's plenty of better things to do than be spending your time on social media. I agree. For me, it fills a void whilst I'm having a poo. Real drunks like their bars quiet. That's why we drink there in the morning and afternoon. At night, we drink at home. Yeah. I guess I'm a real drunk. I don't know if that's a good thing, though. And just to come back to the colorblindness from Need to Connect, it was a rare form, never affected him. Only when other people gave him directions based off of purple objects, he constantly had to say, "I don't know what purple is." Yeah, that must be really annoying. Although, how often are things like purple, really? Like in general signage and things like that. There's a lot of blue, but very rarely can I think of anything purple. So I guess it wouldn't have been a massive problem in the same way like red-green could be a massive problem for someone. But interesting nonetheless. I didn't actually know that there was the purple-blue one. Which is why I instantly assumed it was incredibly rare because I remember looking into it when one of my mates at work was going on about it. And yeah. And also we thought that one of my daughters might be colorblind, but she isn't. She was just being silly. She was just telling us that these colors were the same color and watching us react and get frustrated. She was just trolling us at the age of 18 months, yes. And now she's almost 3 and she's twice as difficult, at least. I love purple myself. Purple and burgundy and black. Probably my top 3. So no beef started. Martain says, I can recommend the Substack entry called Requiem for a Hellscape when it comes to a good analysis of the good and bad of Twitter. It's a good way to spend 10 to 12 minutes. Martain, chuck us a link if you would, and that sounds like a good way. Yes, you're right. Magenta doesn't actually exist. It is in your head. It is literally the two different light frequencies hitting each other and us perceiving the color. It doesn't actually have its own wave like other colors do. So yes, you're not colorblind, but you see colors differently. That must be incredibly interesting. But yeah, I would be interested to know how you do it. Is it sort of synesthetic, like you almost smell the colors, or feel the colors, or do you actually see them very differently? Are you maybe someone who's got additional cones in their eyes, so you see more colors? I'm intrigued, but maybe this is one that we take off stream because we are definitely going off topic. Check your Twitters about it later. I mean, if you're talking about the magenta thing, I think I've actually shared an article historically. Wolf, but I will check it later anyway. And yeah, Wolf says that he needs to know what that's like for you too. So there's two of us who's really interested in how you experience the color, and he's saying that he has a strange form of synesthesia too. So that's very interesting. But yes, Dave. So are there any more things that you can see? It seems that the general opinion from the chat is that Musk. Are they any different? I don't know. Musk is going to tank Twitter, whether intentionally or not. I don't know. He seems to have plans for it. I doubt he'd spend 44 million on something with the intent to tank it, unless he does something like Lone Wolf said with repurposing it. But I don't see why you wouldn't just evolve the product and repurpose it that way rather than tank it and build a new one. Because, you know, if he's tanked it before, why would anybody go, oh yeah, here's Musk's new social media? So I can see that he could potentially evolve it into like the Black Mirror episode, where everything was run by social media, or the Orville episode. But are there any other harms that you can think of off the top of your head that you can think of coming out of this?
No, not really.
No. Was there anything else you wanted to cover on the conversation of power and the Twitter takeover?
No, that's pretty much all done.
Awesome. So on Tuesday, we're going to be having a bit of a Christmassy vibe going on. We're going to be talking about Santa. Dave, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what we're going to be discussing on Tuesday?
There was a conversation recently where there was a bunch of people talking about how they thought it was immoral as a skeptic to teach their kids that Santa was true. And so just it was all about, in the name of good skepticism, teaching children good skepticism and critical thinking.
So yeah, we're going to be having a conversation about the morality of lying and good skepticism and child development. So that'll be Tuesday's stream. And the following Thursday, we might not be streaming. We might be. It depends on if I can be bothered to get the decks out. And then obviously we've got our party and AMA Discord stream that we will be doing the following week. So there's some stuff coming up for you. And obviously, I'd like you to take some time to check out some of the new videos that we've been putting out as well. Most recently, I've put out one on the issues with agnostic atheism. And I am going to be doing videos coming up on the evolution and various definitions of atheism and various types of non-theism, and just trying to explain how the language has evolved and how these different terms are used. And I'm actually going to try and do the definitions of atheism one without showing my bias, because you all know I've got a preferred definition for atheism, and I'm going to try and keep it as clean cut as possible, apart from giving a slight slamming to rock theism, because fuck that noise. Dave, do you have anything that you want to say before we sign off?
No, just thanks for the chat. It was interesting and fun.
Yeah, thank you as well. I always enjoy these ones about power. It is a topic that I'm still relatively new to, and new to my thoughts on, so they're not as well refined. So I always find that I learn something from it. Sometimes I don't realize I've learned it until a couple of days later, and I go, "Oh, that's what he meant." But I'd also like to thank everybody who's joined us tonight as well. I've really enjoyed the chat. You've kept it really nice and busy. I've tried to get as many comments through as I could. If I did miss any, it wasn't personal. It was just the fact that, there's only so many comments you can get through. And hopefully we will see you all on our streams next week. So thank you very much, everybody.